Hey everybody, what's up? Aaron here, Question Period Canada. Thanks for joining us. We're without Parliament for almost another month, so I was doing some research on trying to find some videos that I could make into something else, and I found some interesting pieces. They're pretty much Poilievre just schooling Trudeau and the Liberals, but also speaking to Canadian voters, which is always nice to see that he does know how to interact with Canadians, where our current leader does not. I don't want to sound too much like a Poilievre promoter, but I do promote change, and it's not like we're going to be electing the Bloc Québécois. So we're going to get ready to jump right into it. And this first bit is Pierre Poilievre talking to a group, I believe in Nunavut. And so we're going to jump right in.
You know, and he's bringing in a ban on hunting rifles. C-21 plus the OIC targeted dozens of hunting rifles, in addition to BB guns, airsoft guns, paint guns, and countless other things that he wants to ban. He's openly said he wants to ban hunting rifles. Now, make no mistake, if Justin Trudeau is Prime Minister after the next election, he will ban all civilian firearms. No doubt about it. He's made it clear that that's what he wants to do. He has said it, and he has published 300 pages of rifles that he wants to ban. Now, your local Liberal MP will put on a show about how he voted on C-21, but here's the bottom line. As long as he's keeping Justin Trudeau in the Prime Minister's office, Trudeau can use that power through a cabinet order to arbitrarily list any of your rifles and ban them from your use. That is the reality. And until your Liberal MP leaves the Liberal caucus and withdraws his support from Justin Trudeau, he is supporting Trudeau's ban on your hunting rifles. My common sense plan is to, all right. Yeah. All right. So there's one person in all of Yukon that wants to ban hunting rifles. Maybe I think it was a CBC reporter over there. So here's my common sense plan, folks. We're going to target the real criminals. Instead of targeting hunters in Nunavut or Labrador or Yukon, they're not the ones shooting up downtown Toronto. The firearms violence, which by the way is up 100% under Justin Trudeau, is the result of illegal gun smuggling from the United States of America. It is not the result of lawful, licensed, trained and tested PAL and RPAL owners. So I'm going to repeal Trudeau's ban on hunters and sport shooters. I'm going to take the savings from canceling the gun grab and put it into bolstering our borders to keep the illegal guns and drugs out of our country, and I'll put the criminals in jail. In other words, we're going to go after the real bad guy. Money, of course, is merely a technology by which
this is so interesting, this piece. He explains money
over time and space. And without it, our species would have to consume in the present everything that it produces. Most species do. They have to eat what they kill right away, lest it be stolen or spoiled. Sure, squirrels can squirrel away a little bit. A good habit the government should learn from, but most species have to use it or lose it. We developed a technology that would allow two people who are exchanging things to go ahead with their exchange, even if each did not have the ability to supply the other with something that the other wanted. They could simply use this technology called money in order to transport the value between each other across time and around different geographies. And so over time, money has taken many forms. In one South Pacific island, it was just a ledger carved on scarce limestone. In some places, it's been beads or seashells. In prisons, they use cigarettes. In school, they used to use candy when I was a kid. Throughout history, it became metal, some precious, some brute. We had gold, we had silver, we had copper. Many different means of translating value across space and time have been used, but politicians have found it a nuisance to pay their bills using money with integrity, because back in 1215, poor old King John was forced by the barons and the commoners to sign this nuisance of a document called the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. And in that document was inscribed the principle that the crown could not tax what the people had not approved. And that principle is still in place here in this parliament today. Government can't spend what we don't vote on 800 years later. And you look around and see the beautiful green here. You know where that comes from, of course. It's because that was the color of the fields in which King John was made low. And that green should remind everyone that the people in the fields who are actually doing the work, they're the ones that produce the money that we spend around here. That might have been a better answer in the committee than a government's broader macroeconomic framework, Mr. Speaker. But I digress. But you see what happened after King John was prevented from going on taxing what people had not approved. He was forced to go back to the commoners to get their permission to take their money. He and his successors would become increasingly creative in sourcing the cash that they acquired. Years later, King Henry VIII, who is more famous for clipping off the heads of his subjects, decided that he could get his hands on money by clipping coins.
It's really interesting.
And his regime would clip off the edge of the coin, and that way they could melt those edges down and make more coins. And back then, it was hard to make coins because it was the British pound, which was a pound of silver. And by clipping off a piece, you could melt it down and create more coins, and John could inflate the value of currency in his hands, thereby deflating the value of the wages that his peasant class earned. He got even more creative later on, and this is how he got his famous nickname. He would actually have his minters melt down the British pound, and he would re-mint it with just a tiny coat of silver around the outside of a copper coin. So people would think they were getting a silver coin. Meanwhile, on the inside, what they actually got was copper. The problem is, being the egomaniac that he was, facing outward from the coin, he didn't want a profile shot. His face was on the coin, and it stared everyone in the eye when they looked at that coin. But his nose protruded the farthest out, and when it was in people's pockets, it would rub against the inside of the pocket, and the silver would scrape off the tip of his nose, meaning that you have a silver coin with a red nose, and thus he got the nickname Old Copper Nose. And every time someone saw that red copper nose, they knew the king had stolen the real value of their money. Throughout time, other politicians have found other creative ways. The dictator Dionysius, who was a Greek dictator in Syracuse, he actually took all the coins, the 1 drachma coins, and he stamped them with a 2. So all of a sudden he had twice as much money. Now I hesitate to tell that story in this House because I worry that this Prime Minister might think that he could do the same. You know, if you run out of money, if you run out of money, he'll say, you can always get more. You'll turn loonies to toonies and toonies to fours. That might be the next creative idea by which government could get its hands on money. And throughout the 20th century, we saw this same tactic of cash creation in, of course, with the most famous example was in the early 1920s in Germany. They had created so many new units of account that inflation ran rapid out of control. You needed to have a wheelbarrow full of cash in order to buy a loaf of bread. started, and if you got to the bar to try and drink away your inflationary blues, you ordered all your beer at the beginning of the night because as the minutes went on, it became more expensive. And of course, we in this part of the world have not been immune to this inflationary disease ourselves. While in the post-war era, we inherited monstrous debts fighting the fascists, but governments had hard money from the end of the war until the early 70s. We basically operated on an American-led standard whereby you could, if you had a U.S. greenback, you could exchange it at a rate of $35 per ounce of gold. And in that period, of course, we had an enormous amount of prosperity. The Americans paid off their war debts. Here in Canada, with solid currency, we wrestled the inflationary beast to the ground in the post-war era. We took our record debts that we inherited from the war. We paid them off. We increased the size of the Canadian economy by 300%. And by 1933, we had basically become a debt. In 1973, we had basically become a debt-free country. But then what happened in the 1970s? Well, President Nixon wanted to spend on warfare and welfare. Of course, the Americans were bogged down in Vietnam, which was costly an enterprise, and President Nixon wanted to keep his popularity at home, so he decided to spend. And in the decade that followed 1971, not only did they unleash the American dollar from any particular standard, but they increased the number of U.S. dollars in circulation by 150%, while output only grew by about 39%. In other words, the amount of money grew about 4 times faster than the amount of underlying output that money represented. Now, here in Canada, we had Pierre Trudeau, and he looked down at all the inflation that the U.S. government was creating. They had reached double-digit inflation down there, a total inflationary crisis. The American dollar was devalued on an international basis and, of course, was incapable of buying affordable petroleum on the world market. They liked to blame OPEC, but they took no responsibility for the fact that the unit with which they were buying oil on the international markets was itself devalued. So Trudeau says, he looks down at all the misery in the United States. He looked at how people were lined up at gas stations trying to wait for an hour and a half in order to gas up their cars. He saw the poverty that was overtaking inner city streets. He saw the expanding wealth gap in the United States of America. And what did Pierre Trudeau say to all that? He said, let's have some of that up here. And so he started printing some money here in Canada and massively increased the money supply with which Canada, I just have the data right here. Between 1971 and 1981, the money supply in Canada grew by over 200%, while GDP only grew in real terms by about 47%. So you can imagine, money is growing in supply at more than 4 times the rate as the economy is growing. So you have more dollars chasing fewer goods, and what do you get? Inflation. That's right. That is, we learned that, all of us, we learned that in grade school, but apparently some lessons need to be learned and relearned here in this House of Commons.
Resuming debate.
The honourable member.
Resuming debate.
So that was just him schooling on money to the Liberals and where it comes from and how it works and how things that I think most of us know already, but it's still fun to see him put it out there the way that he did.
I always like to fill the room with suspense.
And school them some more.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I will be splitting my time with the honourable member for Calgary-Mindipore. After 8 years, we've had an opportunity to assess the results of the latest grand experiment. We know the experiment we're always told we need to conduct. The experiment is that socialist parties come along and tell voters that life's not fair, that there's too much greed, and the solution to greed is for government to get big and powerful,
take the people's money and spread it around in a way that's fair, so everybody gets their rightful due. Now, of course, the question is who actually gets to carve up the spoils and decide who gets what? Well, the answer, of course, is government itself, and government makes its decision based on politics. Of course, politics is based on, unfortunately, influence, and those with influence tend to be those with money. And as a result, those with money can convert that money into political power, and that power back into yet more money, and that money back into more political power, and the cycle goes and goes and goes. And so while the promise was that the government would get grand and powerful and take from the rich to give to the middle class and those working hard to join them, remember those people? We don't hear about them very much anymore after 8 years. In fact, in practice, the game is played very differently. Let's talk about the question, the very simple question of public finance. From whom to whom? So from whom has the money come, and to whom is it going? Let's start about from whom. The money is coming from the working class people of this country who are under a siege not seen in at least 40 years. Inflation has reached a 40-year high as the cost of government has bid up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits have increased the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. So the real human impact of this highly predictable economic phenomenon is that 67% of Canadians now agree that everything feels broken in Canada. We have 9 of 10 young people who don't own homes say they never will. We have students now, according to media reports, living in homeless shelters while they study. We have 1.5 million people eating at a food bank in a single year, some of whom asking food bank presidents for help with suicide, with medical assistance in dying, not because they're sick, but because the poverty that they experience after 8 years of this Prime Minister is so insufferable that they would rather end their misery altogether. We have mortgage payments. The average mortgage payment has doubled from $1,500 to over $3,200. The average rent payment in our 10 biggest metropolitan centers has doubled as well. So the people, by the way, food prices are up 12%, energy prices have off and on experienced inflation of at times 100% year over year. And by the way, these are the commodities that make up a much larger part of the budgets of the low income and working class people. So and the answer to the question of from whom is, of course, Canada's working class people, the people who get out of bed every day, who do the nation's labor. They are the ones who are paying the bills for this experiment. So the second part of the question is to whom? Who's getting all this benefit? Because I think when we look around our communities, we don't see a lot of people putting up their hand and saying, boy, I sure have received a windfall. I don't know how many constituents of the members in this chamber here today are getting $1,500 an hour contracts from this government. No, zero. We're talking about a very small group of people who are getting these benefits. And who are they? Well, let's start chronologically. Let's go back. Let's start with SNC-Lavalin, right? This is a perfect example of the experiment of which I speak. They went to a socialist country called Libya. Libya, the word socialist is actually in the republic's name. And so you would think they'd want nothing to do with a multinational. Well, of course, that multinational bought influence and stole over $100 million from the poorest people in Africa. Now, the Prime Minister was not going to let a company like that face criminal charges, so he actually fired his Attorney General because she refused to have those charges dropped. So we see the Prime Minister protecting a corporation that had stolen from Africa's poorest people, a corporation that of amongst the most privileged people on planet Earth. After that, we saw the Prime Minister give grants, multi-million-dollar grants to Loblaw to pay for fridges, to credit card companies, highly profitable credit card companies, to provide them with corporate subsidies. Recently, his finance minister was confronted about the plan in the budget to fund $2 billion to a company that does not exist. And the finance minister, when she heard that allegation, said that is absolutely false. It's not $2 billion, it's $15 billion. But we can imagine who's going to benefit from that. And now, McKinsey. Now, the Prime Minister gave a glowing speech about his non-friend friend, the non-friend he likes to hug, Dominic Barton, who said that he had hired Mr. Barton for $1 a year. Somehow $1 became $50 million, and then it became $100 million, and then it was $120 million. And because the price tags keeps rising, I actually asked the Prime Minister now, close to a dozen times in the House of Commons, what is the total dollar value of all the contracts the Prime Minister has paid this company after 8 years, and he still can't answer the question. But we know that they're making a lot of money, and according to the government departments that hired them, in many cases did no work of any value. And so the public servants who could have done the job themselves say this company came in with a bunch of fancy charts and graphs and the latest MBA-isms and made off with millions, and no one can actually figure out what they did for the money. That's to whom the money is going. In fact, this government has increased the budget for high-priced consultants by nearly 100% to over $15 billion. For context, we have 15 million families in Canada. So that means each family is spending $1,000 in federal taxes for high-priced consultants. That's to whom your money is going. So if you are sitting at home wondering why your paycheck evaporates in federal taxes and asking where it all goes, well, that is one answer to the question. Now, should we be surprised that these are the people that are getting all the money? Well, wouldn't you expect it? This is the circle this government travels in. These are the friends that they hang out with at Davos. And none of my members went to Davos. That's right. We're not going to Davos. We're staying
talking about the
in our
WEF
communities
just
while
in
the meeting in
case
Davos was happening recently. We work for our people on the ground, the common people. This is the House of Commons, and the common people deserve to have a voice in the House of Commons. You know, and so we learned the lesson here that just because the state takes over the economy doesn't mean it transforms human nature. It doesn't mean that it abolishes greed. It just redirects greed. You know, as Macaulay might say, if I might paraphrase him, wherever you throw the carrion, the raven's croak is loud. Wherever you fling the honey, the buzzing flies will crowd. Wherever down river garbage floats, the greedy pike you see. And wheresoever such lord is found, such client soon will be. Macaulay referred to the flies chasing the honey. Flies don't make honey, they take honey. Bees make honey. And that's the kind of difference we have. When the government runs the economy, you get rich by taking. When you have a free market economy, you get better off by making. Almost imagine the conversation between
that was
the
a quick
Liberal
change.
Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, who was found guilty of breaking the ethics law, and the Prime Minister, who's twice been found guilty of breaking the ethics law, saying, how are we going to
These are just some funny moments to wrap up.
I know, we'll
for a
appoint
few
my
minutes.
sister-in-law as the ethics commissioner. What a plan. It is foolproof, Mr. Speaker. My question, though, is when are they, the problem is pretty soon they're going to run out of family and friends, and after they do, how are they going to avoid their next conviction for breaking the law? Fraudulent CERB recipients was the question. How many?
Minister.
9 million Canadians supported by CERB.
Member for Carleton.
So the only number we're getting was 9 million when I asked how many people took the CERB that didn't live in Canada. If 9 million isn't the right number, which number is?
Speaker,
Minister.
maybe the honourable member would like to know about CEBA that helped over 898,000 small businesses survive.
Member for
Boston
Carleton.
was a joke.
Why is the minister hiding the true number of people not living in Canada who got the CERB?
Minister.
Following a steep decline of 27% in the first half of 2020, corporate profits rebounded to 61% above pre-pandemic levels.
Member for Carleton.
Could we replace the minister with a cassette tape that we could just hit play on?
I guess that's a question for the minister. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure there's all kinds of technological advancements available, but I can tell you that the wage subsidy helped over 450,000 employers.
Member for Carleton.
5.3 billion.
Is there a technological advance that might help the minister answer the question?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the rent subsidy helped more than 213,000 businesses stay afloat. That's good for all Canadians.
Member for Carleton.
Can the officials who are here today hand the minister a new script? He seems to be reading one unrelated to the questions. We're not talking about some kid who made one mistake when he was 19. We're talking about people who do 60, 70 violent offenses. And then they're, because they're criminals.
But why are they criminals?
Because they do crime.
And why do they do crime?
Because we let them out early on bail.
So because they
I
got
think we've
let
solved
out.
the riddle here.
But don't worry about crime, because Justin Trudeau's going to ban hunting, right? He's going to stop the hunters in Sudbury and Nunavut, and that's going to end. I actually asked him what he was going to do about the stabbings that are happening. He actually said he was going to ban guns. Seriously?
Can't make this stuff up.
Is he going to ban butter knives?
Important for the honourable member across the way to understand that our government helped 9 million Canadians who lost their job through the CERB.
Carleton.
They hand him a speech that they wrote for him, a bureaucrat wrote for him, and he just stays glued to it. I mean, why don't we just elect a robot to read off these speeches that are written by bureaucrats in the finance department? Because that robot at least would stick more tightly to the script than he has. If he doesn't actually have any answers to the factual questions, is it possible that he could be replaced with a robot?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that the member opposite doesn't like the answers that I'm providing, but I know the Canadians do.
Violent gun crime is up 101%, right? Here's why. Criminals don't follow gun laws. You don't stop to get a possession and an acquisition license on the way to robbing a bank.
Consumer confidence that went to an all-time low. It's back. That's good for business. That's good for Canadians.
Member for Carleton.
One last time, FinTrack, which is responsible for monitoring monies that are misappropriated in organized crime and money laundering, indicates that many people receive the CERB even though they don't even live in Canada. I'm going to ask one last time, how many was that?
Minister.
The member knows that FinTrack is independent. What we know is consumer confidence is back, that people are able to pay their bills thanks to our historic investments in their lives and in their livelihoods.
Member for Carleton.
What has been the inflation rate for the price of land in the last year?
Minister.
I'm glad to talk about inflation because we know that it's a global phenomenon.
Member for Carleton.
Land prices are a global phenomenon. Does the minister realize that the land we have here doesn't come from the rest of the globe? It's already here.
Minister.
You can read Hansard, and as the honourable colleague can, I said very clearly, inflation is a global phenomenon.
Member for Carleton.
Landflation, how much?
Minister.
Our inflation is in line with peer countries around the world, and in fact, we're doing much better than the United States, Mexico, and countries in the Eurozone.
Member for Carleton.
The question was about land price inflation. How much have land prices inflated in the last year?
Minister.
Land price is part of the basket of goods in inflation. Our inflation is in line with peer countries.
Member for Carleton.
He's allowed to say he doesn't know.
I spent a... Whoops. Sorry. Hey everybody, what's up? Aaron here, Question Period Canada. How are you today? Great episode coming up. It's the coalition is breaking down. There's been so many coalitions. Now there's the new Bloc Québécois coalition with the Liberals. The initial...
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
Sorry. We're going to get back to the video. The last one, we've already gone a little further than I thought we were going to, but I don't want to go out on a off note. This other video you maybe have seen before. It's the most popular one I've done. It was so much more popular than everything else that I've done. Like it got 50,000 views in the first day. It was a lot for me. Anyhow, we'll jump right back into that. Hey everybody, what's up? Aaron here, Question Period Canada. How are you today? Great episode coming up. It's the coalition is breaking down. There's been so many coalitions. Now there's the new Bloc Québécois coalition with the Liberals. The initial coalition with the NDP, it's breaking down though. Jagmeet goes at Trudeau pretty hard. Trudeau responds. Jagmeet goes again. Trudeau responds. Then Poiliev steps in, makes fun of the whole thing, the coalition between the NDP and the Liberals, and he sets Trudeau off. Trudeau loses it. It's fun at the end. Let's take a peek at how Jagmeet goes at Trudeau first. Let's take a look.
South.
The Liberal and Conservative corporate coalition may strike again today. We put forward a plan to help Canadians with their home heating bill, to help Canadians tackle the climate crisis and make big oil and gas pay for it. Now, environmental organizations are on board, but climate delay Liberals and climate deny Conservatives will back the profits of big oil again. So how can the Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservative Party justify voting against this?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it was with confusion and consternation that I noted the way the NDP voted with the Conservatives against one of the most successful measures Canada has ever seen in the fight against climate change. Putting a price on pollution is exactly how we've managed to bend the curve on our emissions faster than other G7 countries over the past 2 years. How we are moving forward with global leadership on the fight against climate change. Seeing the NDP vote with the Conservatives against a price on pollution is something that has disappointed millions of progressives across this country.
That right there is one of the issues that I have with the coalition government. How can they be having these lovers' quarrels, strange political bedfellow coalition? It doesn't make any sense, and now they're spatting. It's embarrassing. It happens again, though. Jagmeet asks Trudeau more questions.
Burnaby South.
People are struggling to find a home they can afford. And this federal government has the power, the land, and the resources to end the housing crisis. On one side, we've got the corporate-controlled Conservatives that want to sell off our public land to their rich investor friends that helps no one. But on the other side, we've got Liberals who are openly admitting that their plan is to use public lands to build luxury homes. How can this Prime Minister justify using public lands to build homes that people can't afford?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. We know Canadians are worried about paying their rent, finding an apartment, or buying a home. That's why we're working on affordable housing and affordable housing affordability right across the country. It's why we put forward the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act, which helps build more affordable apartments by cutting the GST on construction. Housing advocates and developers have described this move as a game changer that will get more affordable housing built. It's why it's essential that all members work with us to move these important measures forward.
Politics makes for strange bedfellows, doesn't it? I don't understand what is going on with these coalition governments, how they can do it. You're supposed to stand up for your party, not get together with the other parties. I don't understand. It's just weird, isn't it? Trudeau doesn't like the pressure that Jagmeet's putting on him, but Poiliev is going to make fun of that and then deliver another question, and Trudeau completely loses it, flips out, doesn't answer the question, but gives some speech, and it doesn't feel like it fits. I'm concerned about our leadership in the country. Look for yourself. I think you'll be concerned too. It's kind of funny, but like, that's our leader.
Then I have Chef.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Most tragic and heartbreaking to see these two squabbling in this way. The Prime Minister was so disappointed in the NDP leader's flip-flop on carbon tax for heat, but the good news for the Prime Minister is the NDP leader has flip-flopped on his flip-flop and now supports the Prime Minister's plan to quadruple the tax.
So he makes fun of them right there, as you saw. It's pretty funny, but then asks this question and Trudeau goes off. It has nothing to do with the question that was asked, the answer he gives. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of scary to see that our leader is behaving like this. Answer a question, buddy. Don't flip out.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister only divides to distract. That's all he ever does when he gets into trouble. He divides people along every possible battle line. He did that with the carbon tax carve-out for only some in a region where his support is plummeting and his caucus is revolting. And for 10 days, he refused to condemn the comments of his own Liberal minister who said this policy was applying based on how people voted. And now he signs on with the separatists to divide Canadians again. Will he, instead of dividing Canadians, reverse the policies that are driving them to the food bank?
I will admit that I wouldn't like being asked a question with that many insults in it, because Poilievre layers on the insults. But this answer that Trudeau gives right now, it makes no sense. He's talking about the transgender community and women's rights over their bodies. He was asking a question about food banks. Watch.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservatives' approach to partisan politics and to personal attacks. The reality is, when we stood with the 80 to 90% of Canadians who chose to get vaccinated, they called us divisive. When we chose to stand with women across this country who want to control their own bodies, they called us divisive. When we stand with the 2S LGBTQI+ kids who are being discriminated against in schools across this country, they call us divisive, Mr. Speaker. I ask Canadians, who are dividing Canadians more than Conservatives with their attacks, with their choices, with their politics?
Okay, everybody, that's about where the video wraps up. Trudeau loses it about a question about food banks, talking about transgender issues and women's rights over their bodies. It's delusional. I'm a little concerned, but it's entertaining to watch at the same time. I do think this coalition government is going down. Trudeau is cracking under the pressure. Right now, the video is kind of over, but if you would like to have one more laugh or gaffe at Trudeau, I'm going to throw a filter on him here and listen to the same speech. It's just funny to see this. He kind of looks like this to me now when I see him in my mind. I'm Aaron. Like and subscribe. Question Period Canada. We're having fun with Canadian politics, trying to keep up on what is happening while having a good time. So if that appeals to you, like and subscribe. Follow us. We're doing great things here, and it is a lot of fun. We'll catch you next video. Take care.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservatives' approach to partisan politics and to personal attacks. The reality is, when we stood with the 80 to 90% of Canadians who chose to get vaccinated, they called us divisive. When we chose to stand with women across this country who want to control their own bodies, they called us divisive. When we stand with the 2S LGBTQI+ kids who are being discriminated against in schools across this country, they call us divisive, Mr. Speaker. I ask Canadians, who are dividing Canadians more than Conservatives with their attacks, with their choices,
right there.
with their politics?
Hey, everybody. All right. So that wraps up our live for this evening. I'd like to thank everybody. This is getting to be, well, it's been fun since it started, but we're gaining a community here of people that like to interact. I promise I'm working at making the videos better. Like we're trying to be more resourceful in the stuff that we collect and re-show. So it is fun learning about Canadian politics, finding out what's going on. I might seem, again, very much pro-conservative. I'm in favor of change, and we're not going to elect the NDPs. We're not going to elect the Bloc Québécois. It's going to be the Conservatives in Canada, so they represent change. My name's Aaron. Like and subscribe. We have a good time when we're here. I appreciate everybody watching. Like, subscribe. You can join the channel now too. Not putting any pressure on anybody for that, but it's an option. And we will be back on a regular basis doing more. We've still got almost 4 weeks until Parliament is sitting again. So I hope to get pretty creative and bring some cool live videos. And I'll also be posting my shorts and other regular videos too. So that's it. We're going to get going. Thanks again for watching. Consider subscribing, and we will catch you next video. It's always a pleasure hanging out.